Hey, g'day. Welcome to People Purpose Place. And I might really have just undid my own good work this evening playing around with the leads and dropped all the screens out. Anyhow, don't mind me and technology. Welcome to People Purpose Place. G'day, Darren and Christine. Again, jumping in for our Monday night chat.
G'day.
All fit and well this week?
Yep, ready to go.
Yeah, ready to roll.
Awesome. Just to recap on People Purpose Place for those who are playing along at home, and we see some of you jumping in the chat as well, which is awesome to have a bit of dialogue and question backwards and forwards. The intention is to have a long form conversation around all things housing, getting past the panicked headline topics of housing crisis and maybe thinking about what's going on in the marketplace, what's going on in the housing space, and how might we be able to look at it a bit differently. So we don't hold ourselves out to have perfect answers or all the answers. We're just putting forward ideas with an opportunity for anyone to call us, question us, and challenge that thinking.
And ask questions.
Please do. So a couple of weeks ago, we started out exposing the new build philosophy behind our prototype project at Ginn Road, and our presentation got a fair bit of interest. So we thought we'd continue this week on that discussion. As we always do, though, we start our evening or our session with a bit of an opportunity to check in. Ryan's going to stop touching the leads. But apart from that, what do we need to set aside to be fully present for this evening? Christine, did you want to perhaps jump in with that?
I'm going to ask Darren to jump in first. I got to feel into this.
Okay. As I sort of mentioned to just a moment ago before we sort of came on, I did a bit of a workout as I normally do on a Monday. And give it a bit of a shove. So I've got a little tiny bit of a blood pressure increase at the moment. So I actually took a couple of big breaths to try and get everything under control, before I came back here, because I always enjoy our chat. So made sure I could do what I could do, could be present.
Yeah, good job. Good technique to try and be in the moment.
Absolutely.
How about yourself, Christine?
I've been trying to avoid thinking about going to the dentist, the specialist dentist in Cairns tomorrow, the periodontist, or whatever he is, not periodontist, some dental specialist who puts the implant peg into your gaping hole in your mouth. And I'm so traumatized by good dentistry, actually, as a child, that I just, the whole thought of having to drive all the way to Cairns just to be tortured by a dentist I just wanted to avoid it. And as soon as I felt into what was going on, I thought, shit, I don't want to go, but I will. So that's my check-in. Sorry.
That's really good, because
that's me.
I actually had this morning a similar sort of feeling. I haven't been able to figure out what it was. So I'm still chasing it. I think I woke up with something, might have even been like a part of a dream that I had remembered a little tiny bit of, which has left me with a little bit of residual something or other in the morning. So I'm glad you're able to find what you were chasing, because that's always a bit of a relief, actually, isn't it?
Yes, and I just, it wasn't interesting that I knew I needed to take that couple of breaths to be able to feel into myself to get to that, because if you just, I'm so good at making a quick response, but it's sometimes not the right response. Anyway, Rowan, how are you? What do you need to put aside?
Distraction is
distraction.
For me today.
You have too much to do. You're moving house. You're running a business. You have too much to do.
Shaving off mustaches. You're doing everything.
Shaving off mustaches.
Oh, you see, you did. You shaved off your mustache.
That little critter took some wrestling.
I thought you were wearing it in November.
Yes, there was something to do with mental health is the whole aim of the moustache, but there's also a knock-on effect of wearing a moustache. And
Which is? Tell me
it's
what.
about-
I've never worn one. Tell me what it's like.
Is that other people's mental health gets affected by you?
Correct. Correct. And you sort of got to take it all into account, weigh it all up, and so
Good
the little
decision.
furry caterpillar
Off
is
came the mustache.
no more.
Actually, I did want to say how I think we're all really happy to have Maddie on last week. I think he did added some really good depth to the conversation, and it was
Brilliant.
awesome. And I'm glad. And I spoke to him afterwards, and he's definitely very keen to come back. And we didn't get on to one of the meaty conversations with him, which was, can we have collaborative housing inside a capitalist system? So if he's listening tonight, or I'll definitely shoot it across to him, because I think we could really get into a tussle with that one for sure.
I think so, but I would throw another question in there just to open up the questioning about capitalism.
Yep.
What would have happened if America had had the geography of Australia where it is, and Americans had settled Australia? Would they be as rabid capitalists as they are? Because it's really the Americans who have, sorry about my accent, those Americans.
Yes.
Americans, them Yanks.
Yes.
They've stuffed it up for everybody by being too hyper individualistic, caring so much about money that they didn't give a shit about anything else. And I say that as a born American who said, I don't like this, I'm going to a better country. But what would have happened had those Americans in the 18th or even 17th century been faced up with Australia? I'd be curious.
Yeah, that would be incredibly intriguing, and that might be a second part to the conversation. Also, because Maddie, not coming, being a first generation Australian, would also have a very different perspective. Like coming from somewhere else, looking at Australians in difference to, Rowan and I being whatever we are, second generation, and yourself first generation from America. It'll be interesting to see where that melting pot, our own individual perspective on it. So.
I wouldn't have that perspective had I not been born in America and thought deeply about where have I arrived? What is this Australia? Why do I love it so much? And why did I leave the States? Obviously, but it's only gotten worse. So you have to think deeply about these things. And why would I have made that comparison? Why would I even think, well, Americans have ruined capitalism for everybody?
Yes.
Possibly. Don't know. Good topic of conversation, but let's get Maddie back regardless.
Absolutely.
He was brilliant.
Yeah. Awesome.
Just briefly, speaking of guests as well, I had a conversation with Professor Anne Christine, who I know you'll be interested in. She was keen to come along as a guest as well. So hopefully early in the new year, we'll get her along for a Monday evening conversation around all things healthy housing. So that might be really a good chat. And next week, we also have a guest coming in who's more around, his role is more around the financial controller, accountancy and numbers to make sure it all adds up. And I understand from our chat conversations and online followers that there's a bit of interest in, do these numbers make sense? So they might be some good conversations as well in the near future.
Yeah, awesome.
Darren, did you want to jump back into recap, perhaps start with the Ginroad build conversation from a fortnight ago now, and sort of take us through the design thinking there, and Kristen and I can come along for the ride. Yeah,
cool, and certainly jump in wherever you feel like you want to. And I think last time we might have presented the floor plan as well, and I don't know whether Colby's able to access that floor plan directly, but if not, we can sort of keep going anyway. But ultimately, I think, there we are. Speak of the devil, look at him go. He hasn't got the technology problems that Rowan has. Ultimately, what we were hoping to do is treat very much as the people, purpose, place conversation, or how we've come up with our name, is very much focused on the people first, and then the purpose of why they're there. And then the place, to some extent, is really just the place you reside. So we found that if we ask people, what does it feel like to have a great home? To some extent, these rooms might be almost unimportant. But one thing we have realized is, starting at the front from the people conversation, is that we also acknowledge that we found some common themes that came out from our workshops and from a lot of conversations with a lot of different people. There seems to be, and I think you and I, Rowan, were only talking about this last week, that I think human DNA is 99.9% similar between all of us. So I found it intriguing that all the conversation, strong theme that humans still find it very important to be an individual. But there's a massive reason for us to want to find community, or as Jamie Wheel would call it, communitas, of being our own human, then promoting this sense of community, all in what is a household scale. So we're also adding in there that when you have a look at some of the numbers that reoccur through all of history, old Dunbar worked out all of the recurring numbers that fit together. And one of those numbers that works really effectively is actually 5. So you'll notice with that floor plan that ultimately it was working on the principle of 5. And that also works on lots of other reasons, which is atypically what a household is classed as from a building point of view, and also from a planning point of view. So, which is, interestingly enough, we're only talking about in the last couple of days that the Latin translation of familia is actually household. So it's funny how all of these things fit back together. So the premise originally of the design was to look at this idea of, if we had a group of people who wanted to honor their individualism but live together in a collaborative household environment, what could that look like? And to some extent, although we can see there's absolutely a benefit to finding groups and working in reverse, we've also said that it's very important to show an example. And I think that the term would be an example, not the example, or as we quite often use that idea of, this will be a solution but not the solution, that there will be elements which will be universal for everyone. That's why our DNA is so close together. But also there'll be components which will suit this site or suit specifically a group of people, which will then lead on to other people potentially having their own solutions. But hopefully this gives the place to start a conversation that, to date, there is just no place that conversation can start in Australia. I think by far this would be the first response of its kind in Australia, potentially greater, I would imagine, as far as attempting to go at this level.
We've already had that conversation in international situations where they've said in wealthy, highly developed nations, they're finding exactly the same issues. Yes. They might have different government housing policy and different infrastructure perhaps, but never been more internet connected and more of the world's resources at our fingertips, yet more lonely. So I think planning for a thriving and successful household is a really critical part. Even if you get that wrong a lot of the time, but you have that intention, that's still going to be a fantastic outcome compared to our usual response of looking for a roof over our head. So if I'm looking for a roof over my head, my whole mindset is vastly different to, I want to reside somewhere where I can thrive as a human and likely thrive as interaction with people around me. Vastly different way of just looking at your life.
I love the way you've pulled that together, Rowan. That's so cogent, so clear. that there is a big difference
Mm.
between this model of housing
Mm.
to what we've been focused on, which is the nuclear family, which hardly exists,
Yep.
in a suburban house, which hardly anybody can afford at this point. So, what do? We have to start being a little creative. And I think you two have been very creative in working this model out.
Yeah. Yet still understanding enough of the community regulatory framework that we trip
the
ourselves
point.
up. So we need to meet the banking regulations, the town planning regulations, the whatever regulations, because that's the community that we live in.
Yeah.
But even with doing that, you can intend to and work towards a beautiful solution rather than just pure survival. And I had a really interesting conversation with it is related, with a newly established community housing provider today. And so they essentially came into existence to deliver some housing for older women support middle of this year, and they've just hit the ground operationally in the last month.
Oh.
And they, in a conversation today, they said, "Oh, we're too busy to have this conversation around beautiful housing and living our best possible lives because we're overwhelmed in crisis."
And isn't that the case, that we refuse to change until we're forced to change? And then it's so hard to change.
Perpetual. So every other community organisation we've spoken to, they now get overwhelmed in the crisis response.
That's
so
it.
I'm answering the phone to an 84-year-old who's living couch surfing, and you go, "Oh my God, how have we got to this position?" Yet the response is going to be, how do I get a roof over her head?
Yes.
As opposed to, how does she thrive in a home?
That's right. How does she find community? How does she find support? How does she find shelter, as well as all the rest of these wonderful attributes?
And I think we can't forget that absolutely people need to address their crisis position, and we probably aren't the right people to be having a conversation when you're in that space, because you'll push people out of the way, you'll do all sorts of behavior that you might not otherwise do. I'm going to be the perfect tenant, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Of course $800 a week seems reasonable. You'll say and do whatever you can
to have a
get a
roof
roof over your head. And that's human. We are all that human, right?
Yeah.
So that's probably not the time to have this conversation.
Mm.
Once you have that security, we need to then do the next step, which I suspect that we often retire to the couch once we've got the roof over our head and go, "Phew, that's a relief." And I'm now commuting an hour and a half. It doesn't really suit the kids. It's not close to their school either. There's bloody no infrastructure out here, blah, blah, blah. But accept that that's your lot. Anyway,
that's a good wrap.
This project is intended, and this demonstration is showing how you can work within the parameters of the existing community rather than being imposing or being a disconnect, where people have the ability to thrive. And the structure, the house itself, or the floor plan, as Darren was just talking to, is a small enabler, but it's the thinking and all the bits before that that are the largest part of our chance of success. A big part of it.
So we really need people who are prepared, who have 3, 6, 9, 12 months in front of them to find their group, start to do the agreements. And of course, this is a pilot project that Darren's talking to us about tonight. So it's the one that leads the way, it will be done slightly differently. That is to say, we're starting with the design rather than creating the design with the group. We hope that this is not an impossible situation to start with, but we feel like we have to build something to show people.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Sometimes you make compromises, but we will still have to go through a long period of agreements and whatnot before we can get people moved in. So it's not crisis accommodation.
No. And I think one is about a short-term solution. The one is about a larger scale, long-term solution. So some of those things that people are dealing with in crisis, I don't know how many good decisions have been generally made in a crisis, but it can't be a whole lot. People are making, as you said, in those crisis situations, you'll do whatever you have to do to survive, which is absolutely the wrong time to be making long-term prudent decisions. Because just as you started off this podcasting, Christine, being able to sit there and actually listen to yourself long enough to figure out where your anxiety is coming from, you can't do that while you're rushing trying to get a roof over your head. But I think from a design philosophy point of view, though, to some extent, we have almost put ourselves in those people's shoes, like in difference to design solutions, which are always, hey, here's the greatest floor plan, or here's the 4x2x2, which I saw on the block, or whatever might be the case. This is very much sympathetic to all of the learnings that we've had. So, and there's some good things to be said with some initiatives that have happened over the last 10 years. So the Nightingale projects, which most people who know a little bit about housing probably would have heard a little bit about, those architects who essentially built a place in the centre of Melbourne, from memory, and they tried to work on this concept of, if they built it for the right purpose, that it would attract the right group of people. So they built it on a infrastructure node, so it didn't. They convinced the council that it didn't require any car accommodation.
Right.
They also built it in reverse, so that it was very raw and rustic. So it wasn't finished. So it was very much, suspended concrete. That's what you got to make it affordable.
Right.
And then it had a collaborative response to it, which is on top of the building. I think it was a 3-story walk-up sort of a thing. They had a garden up the top and an area where everyone could come together. So there's definitely some elements that I'm drawn to with that as a response. Now, since then, I think they've had a world of other problems, which comes around, how do you make money out of some of these concepts, which can be the root of all evil, as they say, which I think has made that very difficult for them to perpetuate it. But to some extent, we're listening to those same sympathies, which is, let's understand what could help or what could enable a good group to form. And then also the other thing which I like that we've done is we've been sympathetic to the site. So many designs are like, I'm terraforming this thing. I'm enforcing my will upon this site, whereas what we're trying to is not do that. So these ideas of being sympathetic to what the site offers are really important, because the site is actually really, really, it's got a lot to say for itself. And I think maybe one thing, Colby, if you've got that, or if you can cue that video up, it's about 2 minutes 30. I think that way into just getting some context, because we have a tendency to talk about a site and even see photos, but to some extent, if you can actually envisage it, it might be better. So, if the technology doesn't get in our way, Colby might be able to just jump in whenever he can and start to play that video.
Nothing can ever change the way I feel about you. Promise I will stay forever close we go together. It's all I know, side by side, is how we grow hand in hand. Through these times, we'll fall and rise. Funny how you can open up the gray sky with only one of your sweetest smile. We go together. It's all I know, side by side, is how we grow hand in hand. Through these times, we'll fall and rise. We go together. It's all I know, side by side, is how we grow. We go together. We go together. We go together. We go together.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gone.
Yeah, we go together, all right. It's a beautiful spot, and you can definitely, when we talked about, all of those bits about adding a house on top or a home on top, the site itself just has a beautiful feel to itself, and we certainly, with those design principles of, science. So, what does the site tell us in regards to where things should be located? But then a sense, which is how do we comply with the rules and get common sense around what the council asks us to. But I think the most powerful thing to this, right, is actually the felt sense. So, when you're on that site, and the video imagery probably doesn't actually really highlight its, the most powerful sense of it, So even watching Moggy jump over all of the the grass going down to the thing there, once you're in there and you can hear the water running and all of those things, you go, it's just there's definitely a sense of relaxation that comes from being in pristine environment. And yeah, thanks, Colby. There you can see there the creek down the bottom of the block. So and what we tried to do also is be sensitive to the environment. The house, because of its location, it's funny how these things work, but the house ends up it does face exactly north, which means its short boundaries are east and west, and it basically sits right the way into the gully. So sometimes sites are just meant to have people on them in the right sympathetic environment, and this really, ticks so many of those things. So it's almost like it was meant to be. It was meant to have a group of people who want to care for it. And I think that word custodian is actually really, really important, because I think one of the main attributes of people who would want to be there is absolutely custodians for the site. Because I can see a strong connection with the environment and the country is certainly going to be what would draw a lot of people to be interested in it. So, so that's awesome.
Yeah, it is a very cool space in that presence. Once you get under those shady trees, you can hear the water, and you're away from the obvious built infrastructure in the road and that sort of thing. It becomes, you can just feel yourself slowing down, taking a deep breath and getting connected to the space.
And of course, it's so much prettier when it's green. Most of that drone footage was done after there'd been a frost, and of course, with tropical grasses, you don't need much of a frost, and they just go, I give up.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as pretty as it usually is, but you're seeing it as in its worst aspect.
Yeah. And you could see that when we elevated, like when I got a bit higher, and back up there in a couple of weeks as well. So I'll take some more footage, because we're really at that point now where we go, okay, well, we're far enough down the track. The drawings are progressing to working drawings. We've started to jump through all little hurdles as far as what the council wants to do and all those sorts of things. Engineering's underway. So we're now at this point where we really do want to engage with the people of the local area and I think greater area, because in today's world, where you're located is probably the least limitation from work. If you're certainly can plug in and get into the virtual world anyway, why not do it in one of the best locations you can? I like your statement, Rowan, which I think you've put in here. What should housing look like that you can live in the best version of your life? And I absolutely believe that Ginn Road is going to be that for 5 people or 5 groups of people to go on the adventure of finding their best life.
Do you think that maybe just an awareness of rural community life would be a necessity? There's some things that the Atherton Tablelands won't deliver. The Sydney orchestra won't travel to Atherton or at any time soon.
My goodness. No, I do get your point, but I also think one of the things about that local area is it's realistic connectivity to Cairns, which is a highly tourist-driven, but all the frills as far as, hey, whatever you want, it's down there. You're close enough to that, but far enough away that you can have your sense of place. Like that feels like you could be, central Victoria in the middle of the Highlands. You could be anywhere, and also you have, as much as you talked about the frost there, we also have nice warmth. So if you want to actually have a place that you can come to where you can really soak up the warmth of what the tropics is like, but to some extent maybe without the crazy humidity that you get down closer to the coast. It really is a beautiful balancing point. And so for anyone, there's discussions about we saw all the people who are traveling around Australia who are buying up in the Atherton Tablelands and spending $1 million on a property somewhere. You've got this option where we're talking, really exceptional value and a sense of community. So I don't think I know we've put a sort of an age attachment to this project, but I actually think it's almost irrelevant. Like I think there'll be groups of people that will be drawn to this site for lots of different reasons. And one of them might be, that discussion around elders and what does that look like when you want to, to some extent, everyone uses this word downsize. It's not really downsize. It's sort of up lifestyle, get rid of all the collateral damage you've got as far as all your collections and crap and whatever, and get back to a pared down version of what you want to be, because it's eventually got to be about you. And I think we talked about it a little bit last week, like I asked this question about, can you think about your ideal house? And when you use your brain to think about your ideal house, you start thinking about, it needs to be on the water and needs to have this many bedrooms and needs to have these trinkets and stone bench tops and whatever. But if I asked you to just, really stop and feel what a great home would feel like and envisage those experiences you have in a great home, both by yourself, sitting in environment, but also that idea of being with a close group of people that you're all on the same page with, sitting around a fire, talking tall stories, maybe having a glass of wine or just sitting back and enjoying the environment, or, sharing those stories that we've moved so far away from. that sense of this is the
a home.
place. This is a home. That's exactly the right words, Rowan. So,
Mm.
and I think when I said that, I actually had tingles. So that's worth more than I've got stone bench tops or whatever I have. And I think the people who will want to come here will want a sense of that than I want another collection of bits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that at this point, you've talked me into it. It sounds great. And I guess the invitation is for anybody else who thinks this might be a good idea to be in touch with us, because we have a pilot project running, and it may be that you're geographically constrained, but it may be that you aren't. So it doesn't really matter to us what your age is, what your gender is, what your pronouns are, what your family situation is. Get in touch. We want to hear from you. We want to know who is interested in this and how we start to build a group.
Absolutely. And I think from this, what we're going to find is that once I come back up there, I know we're coming back to have a look at another project primarily, but I'm also going to collect some more. And the idea would be that then Colby could start to then pull together some, real footage that
Great.
rather than just the one that I put there together, but some real driving stuff to say, hey, you can be part of this change, So there's definitely an underlying feeling in society that there's something missing. And I think this might be a way to start that conversation. And I think there's a lot of people out there going, if I could do something different, what would that be? And I think there's no better place to start than the place we called home.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that this will be something where, a lot of even the intellectuals around the world have been talking about the fact that everyone's been, trying to outthink these problems, whereas now's the chance to actually do it. Now's the chance for people to live their better life, not just talk about it. And I think that will be the call to action for all of us. So those first group of early adopters will literally be, I think, lighthouses in the storm for all of us.
Yeah, a home where you've got a bit of amateur music, a bit of your own homegrown food, a bit of your telling stories with people of like mind and value, where you have your own entirely safe and secure private space, but you still have that sense of connection and purpose. And even if that's right, 4 days out of 7, or, it's not going to be perfect all the time. But if that is the intention, I could sign up to that. Rather than perpetuating silliness in big houses with all this collection of stuff around us, and we're still not having meaningful conversations with my kids. Why isn't that happening? And could a home where those relationships thrive mean something more? I'd give everything for that.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And even when you talk about the economics of this, something that where everyone's struggling, everyone's talking about the cost of living, everyone's talking about increasing interest rates and all that sort of stuff. If you could share that with 5 people and reduce your cost of living, and I've had this conversation, and it's probably getting a bit intellectual right at this moment, but this idea that what could you be if you were unshackled from all of these things to survive? I think we could have a better society by having better people contributing to the society. So small regional areas like Atherton, they definitely have a muck in and help each other attitude to them naturally, because that's what small communities necessarily do. But imagine what happens if you have 5 other people who are less restricted by their need to have to earn this to pay this back, who can go, what happens if I can go out and help other people? Or what happens if I can grow a little bit extra fruit in my time here to contribute. So I think these, not only are they homing projects, but they're also community enhancing projects. And I think the blue sky mining of this in the future could be that these households are really about re-enriching particularly regional communities that are really looking for that. With people leaving, it's an opportunity for people to stay and enrich that, not only their own lives, but honestly believe the community around them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the conversation that needs to be had, and if that resonates with you or your group, and we've painted scenarios that, for example, we were talking to a community housing provider, and the lady practitioner manager of the enterprise said she was having a glass of wine over the weekend with a group of her friends. 4 of them individually were maintaining 4 separate detached homes and struggling with yard maintenance, upkeep, all the bills. You got 4 lots of rates, 4 lots of blah 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 blah. And she said, why on God's green earth are we rattling around in 200 plus square meter homes as a single individual, flogging yourself to death to try and maintain it? She said it just doesn't make any sense.
It's crazy.
And then, as a classic example, she's busy in the emergency of housing and hasn't been able to make that change.
Oh, so how ironic. Oh, dear. Oh.
She works in community housing, so she's massively time poor because it's such a crisis.
Yeah.
Yet in her own personal life, she has had that epiphany, awareness, insight that, hey, and a bunch of tradie mates who go camping on a regular basis together. Look, we got 4 trailers, 4 quad bikes, pay 4 houses, 4 lots, 4 sheds. What are we doing?
To store all that junk. Yeah. What are we doing?
And about, like there's so many examples. So, you might find that you're traveling around the country and catching up with the same sort of usual suspects at Lake Tinaroo. We always catch up with this group at Lake Tinaroo, and we're the canoeing mob. All 5 of us have got, canoes or whatever it is, and have that conversation.
Yeah.
Because at this level of financial constraint, you still leave yourself open to do all your best possible work. You can still afford to travel. You can still do all of those things because this is 100% of your capacity in a shelter, roof over your head.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing which is worth adding is we have sort of come about this project a little bit in the first instance from literally the practitioner. Like if we look at this from a building point of view, we'd say the only way to look at housing affordability and all of these solutions is to look at having, slightly increased density without going to high rise and all these things. But to some extent, we realized the most important thing is how the people get on inside that environment. So I just want to reassure people also that this is not just about a housing project. It's actually also about how can you get the skills to be, and we're going on this journey ourselves, which is we're not just, talking the talk. We're literally saying, how do we be better humans so we can be better as a group? And let's model those things and learn those things and add those skills, because there's no doubt that quite a lot of that stuff is now missing from general circulation. But just be rest assured that whoever comes on board, it's not like you're going to be say, here, have fun with that, you 5 people. We're definitely going to be heavily engaged in saying, let's have a look at what we need to form a group. Because we know inside people's brains, some of their residual questions are, how am I going to get on with them? What happens when they leave this out on the table? So although it's not the fun stuff to talk about, you can be rest assured that we've been thinking about that a hell of a lot longer than you guys have, with the fact that we want to give you the tools to say, not only how do I help to grow as an individual human, but how do I grow as a group? And then how do we operate as a group? What is a membership? how do we build trust within this group, and then how do we operate as a household, and how do we do the day-to-day and the week-to-week, and then how do we thrive and go beyond that, and move to, you know, what could be. And then can we share these ideas between other groups, because this group to some extent is going to be a little bit of the champions as well. You know, they're going to be in there in the deep end going, yeah, these are the things that we learned. These are the things that we need to improve on. So be rest assured that the most important role that People Purpose Place has is trying to help you be the best version of a group that you possibly can, because that will be the success ultimately of this project, not the home. The home will be facilitating you being the best version of you.
I wonder if there'll be a medal presented to the group that finds the solution for the toilet seat up, toilet seat down question.
Everybody gets their own toilet. That's all.
There's the solution.
Resolve that crisis.
I always put mine down, because otherwise the green frogs jump in and sometimes they come and kiss your bum. And that is unpleasant.
I can't say that I've been kissed on the bum by a green frog, but I'll give it a swerve, is what you're saying.
I
do find it
love toilets.
It is intriguing though. Like, a couple of the non-negotiables that we've found, which are ingrained in this project, is originally I was talking to everyone about, why don't we have, you know, a bathroom between two people and maybe an extra toilet. And there was a strong throwback from just about everyone in existence, from the idea that one of the non-negotiables in design and living together is a sense of our own selfness, which does come from one of the things, which is none of us likes to share, including green frogs, going to the toilet, you know. So, so it is intriguing that is one of the things that we've listened to very, very strongly. And, you know, put your own toilet seat up or toilet seat down, or have the toilet paper coming from the top or the underside, because that's your call, right? You might be
just writing them down. I'm doing what?
So, but then there's still a place to come back together, because I do find it interesting that, you know, as much as we are all individuals, that there is still a definite drive for us all to find that, you know, core group of people that make us feel complete. And I imagine that's because we're a tribe animal base, because it's funny how we're all drawn back to that space.
Well, certainly people in the distant past could not live without other people. And it's only very recently that we've begun to have the feeling that we could. But if you think about COVID, you think about the war in Ukraine, and you think about the disruptions, and you think about climate change, and you think about where politics are going, you know, life is complicated, and you're never going to be able to eradicate that. So how do we work together to meet each big challenge? And if you don't learn it in a small group, you're not going to be able to do it on a country or a nation or a community level. So we've all got to start relearning what people used to know and have very slowly and now quite precipitously pretty much forgotten.
And it is interesting, though, that I have found as an interesting analogy that, you know, Townsville's gone through a couple of major traumatic events. So, you know, you have a flood, and, you know, Cyclone Yassi came close and those sorts of things. And I find it quite interesting that for a short period of time, everyone puts aside their bits and pieces, and they get muck in together, and there's this beautiful sense of community. And then within a week of us retreating back into our little me housing envelope, we start throwing stuff over the fence at each other. So I think we would all rather be in that first place where we're working together collaboratively. And I think there's definitely something, the more research that we've done into this, I actually think there's definitely something to this idea of small groups, say, maybe 5 as a number, be working really hard to be really dynamic as a group of 5, and then they can work better with another group of 5. So rather than trying to get 25 people together, why don't we get 5 groups of 5 with some level of acceptance? Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that might also be part of these learnings, is that rather than, as you said, trying to get, hundreds of people to agree, which I think around the world has proven to be a failure, even in eco resorts or eco villages. I think
often.
even the ones that have been attempted, even in Australia, have sort of fallen in that flaw. But this idea of just getting 5 people with the best learnings of how to make that work, and even stuff that we've forgotten and have to relearn. And we talked about this even, maybe listening to what we knew in Australia 50 years ago on how to get on together. This idea of mateship and all of those things that we hold so dear about our Australian culture, give it a place to find a home where we can all go back to rebuilding, what we so passionately love about being Australia.
And what's so important to us as humans.
Absolutely. What's so important to us as being humans. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we've probably covered some pretty good territory tonight. There's probably that group of items that in the design, because we've been informed and considered group thinking about the private space, the common cooking, the hearth, the place to come and speak, tell stories or cook food together, that to say it's not true to say that whoever the resident is, that there's no design consideration being given for that, because these are universal traits for all groups of people.
Yeah.
And responding to the space is enormously important and fundamentally has been covered in this design. So chances are that whomever turns up to reside here is going to find a connection to their environment, a connection to their community, and a connection to their own inner human being, a hearth, ability to grow my own food, own private retreat. So that's setting us up for fairly high levels of success from the outset. If any of that's resonating for you as your group of Twitchers or canoeists or nudists or whatever who travel the country and have some level of familiarity with the tablelands and small country town living, it would be really good to continue a conversation to see what that means for you. And I wonder if there's anything we could say is now about a natural time to have a recap and sort of sign off. Do you think, Christine and Darren? Have we covered tonight's
I think
topic?
so. I think we've got through plenty of material, and we haven't had too many technical glitches. Yay!
I must admit, I think your camera, is this the new camera, Christine? Is that
No,
the new?
It's not
right.
here yet. No.
Yeah, right. Okay. It's
No,
still-
we just did a lucky day with broadband.
Yeah. That's right.
That's all. That's all.
Nice.
We were going to have to upgrade our equipment, but we just hit a lucky day today.
And I think
I think we've covered it. I think we just need to do a bit of a call to action, and that's all. Darren, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say my checkout is if everyone is interested, obviously we're hoping the website will be close very, very soon, which we'll start to share with people, but also with Colby working on these snippets over the next probably 2 to 4 weeks. The idea is over the Christmas break, we'll be floating them out into your streams. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an opportunity to consider something over the break, ask some questions, talk to your friends. We even talked about the idea today, Rowan, about Christmas being the ideal time to even do an open letter to your family, so it's a great time for you to rethink about what you're doing. And maybe this is the opportunity for you to go, well, maybe I should be rethink about how I'm living because I really need to get back to the important things in life. And maybe this is the way for you to do that. So keep your eyes open because we want you to come and engage with us and start to have good conversations about ways to live better.
Yes, please ring up, send us an email, get in touch some way, and Facebook will do, and so will email or phone. And we're really keen to start gathering a group together. Wherever you come from, if your heart's in this place, we want to hear from you.
Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Much gratitude for your time, Christine, Darren, to those people on our online feed there. Thanks for dropping in. Some have dropped in and dropped out. So appreciate your time devoted to the topic. These conversations are available to replay and share. So maybe the Christmas break is that time to have that big fat family conversation, rather than the 80% ending up in aged care who didn't want to make that decision themselves. Let's get ahead of it and hope for better outcomes for all of us.
Absolutely.
Sounds great. And I'll keep waiting to find that oldie like me who, I mean, oldie like as in old, as is old, long enough in the tooth to be an oldie, who actually wants to live in a retirement village. Well, let's say an old age care home. I have yet to meet the person who says, I can't. Actually, I did meet one once. It was years ago. She exploited the system very handily, but she was greedy. I did meet one once. But since then, I've never met another who said, I'm putting my hand up for aged care. No. It's always the tragedy that puts you there. So let's, hey, it might be bird watchers, it might be rainforest lovers, it might be mothers, single mothers, it might be young men, it might be tradies, it might, who might our group belong to? Don't know. There might also be some oldies in it.
Yes.
Yeah. Put your thinking caps on. Give us a yell if that sounds of interest to you. Yeah. Likely you've got half a group already that you hang out with. You just haven't joined the dots.
Yeah. Very likely.
Thank you, Darren.
Well,
thank you, Christine.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time. Next week, we're going to have a guest speaker, Michael. As I alluded to at the outset, he's a special individual, of course, but his particular professional skill set around the numbers and the financial control component is really worth hearing for the nuts and bolts of it. So having a conversation with Michael next week will be hopefully really helpful for those of us who, curious, but how do the numbers stack up? Absolutely, the numbers stack up as they should.
That's what we got Michael for.
Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you. Speak again soon.
Good night.
Thanks. See ya. Bye-bye.